Um, Today we're going to cover, well, two topics. Thought it'd be easier just to mesh them together. Um, One is going to be the program of teams. That's what we call it, teams for Chromalox, specifically the stuff I use. Quick walkthrough, quick start guide, where to get some information about using teams. It is what our company is standardized on at this point, and I got to tell you, it's just a really useful, intuitive tool, and especially given the current state of things and how things are evolving, it's going to be something that's going to be leaned on quite a bit going forward. Um, Second topic, we're going to talk a little bit about leads, something that came back from everybody's input. It's been pretty much a common theme. You want good qualified leads. We're putting in some steps in place and some ways of vetting and qualifying those so everyone has good, solid leads going forward. Maybe explain a little bit what we're doing on our side. So for anyone internal to the company, they understand. Anyone external to the company, they understand some of the steps and paths we're going forward with that. So we'll get started here. I'm going to obviously go through a presentation. That's part of this. I'll walk through all the stuff I want to show you first, give you a little bit of a live demo, ask some questions, have some discussion at the end, and we'll go from there. So let's start with Teams for Chromalox. We've had this tool for a couple months now. Some of us are utilizing it quite a bit. Some of us are getting to know it, getting used to it. Like I said, it is a very, very useful, powerful tool, and I enjoy using it all the time. I find myself using it just basically throughout my day at this point. And like I said, given the current state of things and how business is going forward, this just becomes even more and more powerful. One thing I'd like to say to everyone on the call is, obviously you have to, click through, work with it, move stuff around. I set up some things in it initially that I've now gone back and changed as I found something that worked better. So it's a lot of programs, a lot of overlay and stuff that you have to get used to. And I just encourage everyone to work through it and find out what works best for you. So with that said, let's walk through a few things at least I know about and I'd like to discuss and highlight to all of you. When you do start with using Teams, this is the standard quick start. This will be we'll call it the base model. It is customizable. You can add apps and programs and all that stuff, but when you get started, this is what you start with. Now there's a quick start guide that's been circulated around by Fred. I will provide that after this call as well. That's actually a snippet from it right there that just basically explains what everything is, and I'm going to kind of give you my insight and thoughts on that as we go as well. But again, it is customizable, but this is what you start with. You start with activities, chat, teams, which is a topic all in itself, calendars, how do you make calls, some tips for doing that, where the files are kept, and then some of the more important apps that I feel you can utilize as you go forward. To start with, the first two, again, with the respective time and to walk through this, activity and chat. Activity, that's kind of self-explanatory. Think of like almost a social media feed. I got this phone call, this meeting. It comes up in your activities log. I don't really use it much, but it kind of follows through how your day goes together. And then there's a chat form that comes with it as well, and that's specific. That's specific to either the groups you create, which we'll talk about in a moment, or individuals inside the organization that come up, or outside the organization if you can invite them into the different chat rooms. Think of it more of like an instant messaging, but some things that I've learned recently about it. So if you have a message that is important, maybe you're discussing an application or there's a photo reference or anything like that, you can actually flag these things, not with the emoji that comes up as well. You can put emojis in there. But you can flag the message or save the message and search for that in your activities log. There's a nice way to pull things that are important or pertinent to whatever it is you're working on. So if you are having a chat with someone and you're going back and forth on something that's specific that you want to keep or highlight, that is kind of an interesting feature that you may or may not realize is there. You can also share it with your Outlook. So if you need to create an email chain Teams, obviously it's a Microsoft product, and specifically the 365 product from Microsoft. It integrates with your Outlook seamlessly. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. Also, you have, a translate tool and stuff that's also, part of the package. Now, there's my segue into Outlook. You can see without doing anything, if you're working in your Outlook and you're working in Teams, vice versa, your calendar will sync up automatically. They match exactly. Actually, this is my calendar from last week. And that's something that's done for you. There's nothing real difficult about it. It's something to just remember as you go through. They link up really nice. And there's also, when you go to set up meetings, that becomes part of your Outlook as well. I'll show you how to do that and a couple pointers to walk through on that. Files, they come in that standard base design. Now, files comes up in a couple different places. Obviously, these are files you're working on. These are not files on your desktop, on your hard drive. These are files that you actually put out either on OneDrive, which everybody will have an account, or the SharePoint that is now integrated with Teams as well. So the company SharePoint now becomes connected to this. All those programs you can pull up under the files. It's just basically a running log of everything that's in there. So when we get to Teams and some of the other collaborative stuff you're working on, those also are searchable and findable at that point as well. Something else to point out, so if you think of if anybody uses like your notebook or some of the other programs that come with your Microsoft, these are accessible and created here. The only thing I would point out to everyone, you have to look at it as, is it in the Teams network, which would essentially be our OneDrive or our company network, or is it on your hard drive? You just got to delineate between the two. If you put a document into this platform, and then it becomes a live document. Others can edit it based on permissions and stuff. So it's certainly something to just be cognizant of, and as you walk through it. Now, where some of the applications and how this comes together makes it really useful for an organization and larger groups of people is specifically Teams. I think it's well named. It's something that was confusing to me at first is I started setting up different teams. Teams are, people inside your organization that work in a group. And in my scenario, I have a couple different departments that I work within. And so we create different groups to work on different projects, whether that's marketing, sales channel, an application specific, maybe it's a product, a lot of different things that depending on where you're at in your organization, you can work through. But underneath that team, and this was at least the confusing part for me at first, are what they call channels. Those channels are those specific projects, those specific activities. So if you take a group of 10 folks that would be called the team, for whatever reason, maybe it's, like I said, marketing, a sales team, maybe it's a regional sales group. Underneath that, you're going to have individual projects, individual tasks, and working remotely, this makes this really useful because now you can start to collaborate and organize all of your projects into one channel. As an example, and I'll show you here in a second, one of the things that everyone I think on the call realizes that obviously I focus on training and things. We're working in the Heat Trace group to create a certified training program for contractors. And now we work as a group underneath that, putting in different files, things we learned from competition or contractors or requests. And now that becomes a collaborative channel underneath that team. And then from there, we can work on our regions and move things around. And I think at first, the way that was explained to me or reading it on a slide or watching a YouTube was a little bit confusing, but that's how that kind of comes together. And then you create your projects underneath that, and that becomes your channel. So in my case, or my example of our Heat Trace team, we're focused on Heat Trace and the RTSMs and the inside sales and the marketing and all that stuff. Then we start to collaborate into specific things that we should be assigned to, and that becomes a channel. Now it gets more involved than that, and I'll touch on that in a second. There are already teams available to join. There are public teams, there's private teams. Obviously, you can see the public teams, and so you can request to be part of that, and you can, obviously participate in the chats among that group, that team. Or then you go one step below that, and people of that team start to now break off. Think of them in an office setting where you have your larger department, and now you start to break off into your particular groups, right, to do different projects and things, and that's how that kind of breaks out. So you can join one that exists that you can obviously view and do that from join teams, or you can create a new team. Now, when you start working with this in the future, and I think of creating a regional team, a sales team, you got a couple people underneath you or with you, or collaborating with a different group, you put them in the team. Now you start breaking off. Well, you got to create a team. And so if you're not joining an existing team, which could set up like that, you can create a team of your own. And that's what I would encourage a lot of you to do as you start to use teams and we move forward. And so you basically have two options. You can build from scratch, or you can create from something that exists. So if there's already an existing team and they have we'll say the departments and the projects they're working on, and you want to mimic that, well, that's simple, right? That's just basically a cut and paste, and that's a create from portion. But if you build a team, a couple things to point out, you immediately go into, is this private or public? Keep in mind, if it's public, you come up on the list, anybody can join and all that stuff. You can do a private one. Now, in either case, you can now add members. You can request people, join our group. We're working on this project. We'd like you to join. And you can kind of see where I started to punch in an example there. Then that's how you're starting to build your team, right? You're going to build your project, and you're going to walk through it from there. Now, once you have your team, you have some ideas of what you want to work on, some projects to start to get together. Now you have to, obviously start creating tasks. Now, all this seems daunting at first, but it really isn't, because if we're all managing spreadsheets, we're managing requests from different departments or different requests of our certain positions, it actually is quite useful and seamless. And so underneath your teams, you now have either the individual channels or the team itself, and you basically have a set of options at the top. Now you're, obviously back to the base bottle scenario, you're going to have post, files, and wiki. I'll explain those really quick. And then you can customize that even, and stuff that's specific to what you're working on. So if you think of the different levels and the different cascading options available to teams, going to the next choice, so post, we know what those are. Those are, you can post something on there just so somebody can, obviously they get notified if they're in the team or the group or the channel that you've selected, if it's something you'd like to share immediately. At the same time, if we're having meetings like today, we're all on this call and stuff like that, that's going to load into, the posts of this particular meeting in my teams. If you're doing this in a group or a team, it loads in automatically. Like today we did, it had some action items and stuff like that. That takes care of itself. That's kind of self-explanatory. But if there's something in there that you want to get back to, don't want to forget about, back to my point at the very beginning, you can highlight those, you can flag those if needed. There's a lot of capabilities here, and a lot of stuff that you might find useful, some of the stuff you may not, and that's what I kind of want to highlight as we go through here. Now back to the files. The files list on the left that I showed you originally, that's files throughout the teams, throughout your login, your teams. But files specifically to a channel or a team stay in that location. You can still find them from the other location, but these are specific to the people in your group and in your team, and they may be only available, depending on how you load them, to those folks that you invite. Now with that, you have two options. You can take something from your C drive, and it's just a drag and drop, and it goes into the files that you're working on, the files that maybe are there for reference, maybe for location. It's a great database tool to get stuff, one, off your hard drive, right? Give you some memory space, but also to share with everyone. And there's also a sharing site as well that's attached to this, but specific to teams, this is for your group. You can create a new document, just, obviously right out of there, I show you so you can, existing document, a new document, and it's a place to communicate and keep things together. This one kind of took me a minute to utilize and realize the wiki that comes with it is a collaborative editable note application. So it's something that can be done on the fly. It's something that can be collaborated with everyone. personally, I'm using it as a journal, like notes from meetings. And you can see my example there, and I'll show you in a second, to give you something to go back and reference. It's very quick, very simple, and it's just think of a mini notepad for each of those groups as you work through these. So that's what the wiki is. So going to the next step, and something that really expands the capabilities of this whole Teams platform that I've found useful. So you can add apps. And when I say apps, we're familiar with apps. We're familiar with the type of apps, and some of these we may use already. I want to just highlight at least the three I think that are very useful, and you can obviously see the list there. There's all kinds of stuff that you can put in there if you so desire. But you can add an app specifically to your feed or specifically to a Teams or channel specific if you'd like. And in doing so, some of the apps I'd like to highlight are three. It's the OneNote, the Planner, and the Stream, because I think all of you should have some exposure to these. And if you use them, great. If you don't need them, I understand. But it's certainly something that I can find use in just about any department or group in the company. So let's say, OneNote. If you are familiar with OneNote, great. If you're not, think of it as an editable notebook, sketch pad. It's a digital sketch pad, as for an analogy. And basically you can organize a project. You can cut and paste a lot of things from the web or photos or things you're working on, application specific. It's a really good collaborative tool to keep in one folder. This can be easily part of your channel, your project you're working on. A lot of people get a lot done with the OneNote. Think of it as a substitute from using PowerPoint to photos to files. You put it all in one, right? You're creating your own document. Great collaborative tool. Another one that's useful, and I've just personally just started using. So now we're setting projects, we're setting teams, we're walking through different goals, right? Different things to either create a new document, create a sales tool, an application analysis for a customer. And now we can actually use this basically as your project management tool, your planner. I understand we all have our calendars, we all have all that stuff, but when you sit down and you start collaborating with a team or a group and you all are setting a goal, you got to set benchmarks and things to achieve. So in case of my example, create a procedure, create a presentation, and present, right? However those things are, and those seamlessly go into here as the planner app. You can put that in there specific to the different projects you can see that someone's working on in the case of revising specs or whatever it is you decide, and that's what's specific to your team. So definitely want to point that one out to you. And then Stream. This will take you a minute to get used to. It's something we're using. You don't realize it right now. Stream, it gets housed on the SharePoint portion of our company, internal to the Teams platform. But these are your videos. These are your recordings. This is, we'll essentially call it the, YouTube for your internal platform, right? This recording, when it's done, I'm going to go to Stream. I'm going to get that. Many of you participated in the COVID presentation this week. You may have saw the email from marketing about, it's available. You can link these, you can forward them, you can save them, you can download them, but this is where that document resides. So a lot of people may not realize, but that's referred to as streams in this program. So let's get some other useful tools, and something that I'm overall using right now, calls. So there's the app for your phone, and it works pretty much the same way. And then there's the app for your computer, which we're all using more and more at this point. So in the case of phone calls, you can call an individual, and you can do it, via video or just voice. And then you'll have this toolbar that comes up. Now in that toolbar, that's easy. You've got obviously the recorder, which we are using right now. You've got your camera, so you can turn your camera on front and back facing, however you're set up there. And then you have your mic on and off. And then I trust that all of you at the end of this call, you can use your mic to unmute yourself and ask questions and see how that goes. And then the next photo here, this is sharing screen. You can pull the screen away in a conversation. Somebody on the call right now, if you were set to present, could take the screen for me right now and show me something. It becomes such a useful collaboration tool. Oh, here, let me show you something. And then, you have your other options. In these other options, a couple things to point out. Obviously, you got your device settings and your mic and all that. Some things that have become useful or, and entertaining at some point. You can do a video blur, which blurs whatever scenery you have behind you, saying, if you're in, I guess you just don't want people to, I don't know, see what's on your wall or whatever is going on. You can also do your recordings here, and this is where you manage that part of the device. It's nice, and then obviously you have the chat and the participants panel, which we had up at the very beginning. From there, it's just a hang up or answer from there. Obviously, so many more people are working from home, essentially in the last 2 weeks. This has just become so useful and common. Now, in using the call tool, you can call anyone that's in your network. You can dial a number, which is what the keypad is for. And it works either just like your phone or like a video call. All of us are familiar with Skype and FaceTime and all that. Same thing. So now we go to something useful for setting up meetings such as today. Maybe even working with a customer to set up a meeting. A lot more meetings, I have a feeling, are going to go virtual as much as we like face-to-face. That's just the world we're in. Setting up meetings is super easy. Before, when you do a WebEx and all that, arguably easy at the time too. This is even easier. You're in your Outlook, you're setting a meeting. All you do is click on the Teams icon to set up a meeting. It generates the location and the link and all that for you. You got the join Teams meeting. We all did that if we're here today. That's how this meeting was created. Something to bring up to everyone, though, however, there's, obviously in the network, the folks that are here at Chromalox and Thermocoax for that matter, and those outside of our network. So, rep office, customer, you're going to have customers using this a lot more and more. It's not a problem. If you have Teams, great. It will open in your Teams platform if you have it. You can also just join by the web. You'll log in through the web server, and that's your interface. Pretty much the same, just a different platform to get it on. When setting up a meeting, however, it's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. It goes in your Outlook, it goes in your Teams, and you've got that together. Something to bring up to everyone, and it's really useful, and you sometimes forget it's there. When you click the meeting options after that's created, it will take you to a web location for that meeting specifically. And then you'll have basically two options. You can select who can be in the lobby and out of the lobby. That's essentially anyone who has been directly invited. So you send it to their email address, they're invited, they're already logged in, all that stuff. Or anyone outside. So if they're just simply the link had been forwarded to them and they're not part of it, you can set that ahead of time so nobody waits in the lobby. I learned that the hard way the first presentation I did back in January when everyone showed up in the lobby, and you have to individually let them into your presentation. So, but it's also a way to hold people off, so you bring them all in at once as well too. So I leave that up to you. And another option is who can present. It defaults obviously to you, but you can set it to anyone. If you're collaborating with others, you may want to have everyone be able to share their screen or their application or whatever it is they're working on. So you need to select that here so you can give permission right away. Another option is specific people. So if it's, say, I'm working with one of the RTSMs or any of the other individuals in marketing or whoever to present, which we will be doing shortly, I can, so they can take the screen for me and do it pretty seamlessly. And this is where you would set that for your meeting. So that's kind of Teams in a nutshell. I wanted to keep it short because it really is just something that you need to work with and construct to what works best for you and your group or your team. There's so many tips and trainings online that's honestly where I would go to do it, not necessarily listen to me. And also, a lot of you have seen, and if you haven't, let me know. We'll get you on the list. Fred has been sending out a lot of tips and highlights on some of the other useful things that Teams does. I mentioned the quick start guide, which I will send out yet again with this, and all the other things that come up, because this platform is growing. they're adding stuff all the time. So it's also very useful as well, and that's housed in SharePoint. So look for that. And from there, I did want to kind of I touched on a lot of things. I will let if you unmute your phone or you have a question at this point, that's great. What I